Dude, I have been so sick lately. This is going to be so hard for me to do this video. The year is 2018. You are a lead developer at EA, or the CEO of DICE Interactive. Star Wars Battlefront 2 has just released and is, at the time, in its broken state of microtransaction hell. Not to mention, Battlefield 5 has just finished its development, and it's about to launch in one of the greatest PR nightmares of a video game that I've ever seen in my lifetime. If you don't remember anything about Battlefield 5's launch, you can just go research that yourself. It is a whole story that I don't even have time to cover. On top of this, Battlefield 2042 is currently ramping up its production for the near future, and I cannot imagine being a developer at this time looking at what that is about to be for the next several years of development. All of this to add, you have been at the same company, making these same games, dealing with the inefficiency, dealing with the creatively bankrupt AAA studios that keep asking you to spit out these same games, copy and paste, over and over, rinse and repeat, and finally you say, enough is enough. So you and a ragtag band of cohorts leave DICE to begin something new, something bold, but something very risky to say the least, and this is the story of not just our creators, not just the finals, but it's a harrowing story of a group of ex-DICE leadership that decided to forge their own path, to create what might end up being one of the greatest development studios of the near future. Today, ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Embark Studios. So in late 2018, with EA definitely on the downside of public opinion, a man by the name of Patrick Sutherland, along with 5 other big industry leads, left DICE to found what we now know as Embark Studios in Stockholm, Sweden. And I just have to add this in really quick. What a fitting name, by the way. Like, if you're going to name the studio anything, the metaphorical aspect of embarking, right? Embark Studios, creating your own path, finding your own way, just puts a cherry on top of this whole story that we're going to cover today. These 6 people to found Embark Studios were as follows. Patrick Sutherland, who was previously the CEO of DICE, leaves to become the CEO of Embark. Rob Runeson, who is the head of content crafts on games like Battlefield and Mirror's Edge, leaves to become the chief content officer over at Embark. Stefan Strandberg, who was the creative director of Battlefield 1, the GOAT, as well as he was apparently an audio director for a lot of the Battlefield series. He leaves DICE to become the chief creative officer at Embark. Johan Andersson, get this, was a technical director who worked on the Frostbite engine at DICE. That is a big deal. It's one thing to lose a creative person that models and textures. It's another thing to lose someone who knows the fundamental groundwork of your game's engine. That is a much bigger deal, or at least I would think it would be. He obviously leaves DICE to become the technical lead over at Embark. Jenny Holdshiner, also, by the way, I'm sorry if I say any of these names wrong. They are from other countries. It is English, but they pronounce consonants and stuff very differently, so I apologize if I'm saying these names wrong. Jenny Holdshiner, who was the head of marketing at DICE, leaves to go over to Embark. I couldn't find an exact position, but I would be willing to bet she does something with marketing. We also have Magnus Norden, who is an R&D specialist, as well as also an engine developer of some sort. Also leaves to, I'm assuming, do work similar to that at Embark. And we also have Gustav Tilby, who was the art director at DICE, and then left to become the creative director for the finals. I couldn't find any specifics of if he was also working for our creators, but I was able to find quite a lot of confirmation that he was working as a creative director for the finals specifically. And this is a really big deal. Imagine you have all of these quite high up positions, quite important people, all leaving at the same time to go do something different together. I mean, I gotta imagine you're losing your CEO, you're losing your head of content crafts, you're losing a creative director for Battlefield 1. That's a big deal. People loved Battlefield 1. That game is peak. You're losing a creative director for Battlefield 1. You're losing a technical director who worked on the Frostbite engine, which is huge. You're losing your head of marketing. You're losing another R&D specialist and engine developer and your art director. all of this all at once. Like this, that's crazy to me. And these people's missions when they founded Embark, I think it best comes just straight from the mouth of their own website. They say this: as our industry has grown, creativity has shrunk, and today our industry is divided. On one side, indie developers take risks and push the limits, while large AAA giants play it safe, make sequels, remakes, and franchises dominate, while fresh ideas struggle for space. The result? Less surprise, less discovery, less wonder. Embark Studios was founded to do something about this. We try to pair the innovation mindset of an underdog with AAA ambition. Every breakthrough that happens here is driven by asking ourselves, what if? We believe that progress starts with curiosity, and this fuels everything we do, from the people we hire, the culture we nurture, and the products we build. This is a really big deal, by the way. Like if you go to most AAA websites, they're obviously very cookie cutter. They're, just repetitive garbage. But I think it's really important to understand why. It's because they never want to start beef. Think about it. If you're making a company and your most important aspect of that company is profits and maximizing profits, you just never risk starting beef with anyone over anything at all. Like think about it. It's counter to maximizing profits. The more people who are potentially willing to work with you, the more money you stand to potentially make. So businesses would never normally ever say things like this, especially not so blatantly. And I know what you might be thinking, like, dude, this is nothing new. Plenty of people on the internet have said things like this. People have been saying that AAA studios in movies and games and all these things, people have been saying that these people are creatively bankrupt forever. But it's not about that. I know that. The difference is, it's one thing for a public figure to say these things. It's another thing for people online to obviously tout these ideas and for the public sentiment to be this way. It's another thing for the company itself to say this. This is a very different vibe. It's also, let me also say this, it's also a totally different thing for someone at Embark to say these things on a personal profile. It's another thing for Embark as a company to literally put this statement on their website. Because think about it. If you're Embark, you just left a really big studio to go do your own thing. You gotta imagine that kind of blacklisted you, at least from some big companies, because people are going to be upset that you're leaving. They're going to feel like you're stabbing them in the back because now you're competition all of a sudden. Imagine if you're Embark Studios, you just started and you did this. You gotta imagine Embark is probably looking for anyone who is willing to work and collaborate with them that they possibly can. So saying something like this is very risky when your company is just trying to get off the ground and you just founded it. Saying something that ever so slightly might rub anyone the wrong way is a very risky thing to do when you just founded when you just founded the studio in the first place. It's a very risky thing to do, and I think it's very different than most scenarios that we see when people say statements like this. Now, where does this leave us? Well, for possibly the first time in ages, all of these individuals are free. Creatively speaking, of course, but they're also free in a way that most companies typically aren't, and it's going to play a really, really big role in the rest of today's story. Embark is free on a technical level. You see, let me give an example. Most of the time when small indie developers or indie studios form, it's typically founded by the creative types, or it's founded by people with not a lot of money to go around, so they are still very reliant on AAA engines and softwares and utilities that they have to pay for. They have to fork over quite a large cut of their games when they sell. On top of that, they're also very limited by these game engines, by these soft pieces of software and utility that they're using. And they're also limited by their wallets in a lot of ways. However, with Embark, this isn't the case anymore. Several of the people that they have, multiple of them, are technical directors with insane amounts of experience and knowledge, and they have the ability to make something from the ground up and make it well. A great example of this is how they have decided to handle the animations for Arc Raiders. And this is, I think, a really good example of just how much technological know-how that Embark Studios clearly seem to have, at least. Now, personally, I'm usually not a fan of anything machine-generated, right? AI-generated, whatever, right? It's typically very off-putting for me. I'm not a big fan of it. I think a lot of people in general are not very big fans of this. The public sentiment of AI has really gone down over the years. However, I genuinely mean what I'm about to say. I think if there's one studio that has found a good and reasonable use for stuff like this, it's Embark. I remember when I was actually still in my first year of college, Embark posted something about this, and I remember seeing clips of this on social media. I didn't see this blog post. I saw clips of the video, though, on social media about them using their machine learning for their animations, and I thought, oh my god, that's actually one of the coolest things ever. If you don't know what's going on here, let me explain. So if you've ever played a video game like Ever, you've probably seen a pre-made animation that doesn't quite fit the exact scenario of the terrain that you're on. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have an animation where the character is standing flat-footed, both feet together, right? But what if he's standing on a slanted slope like this, right? What's going to happen? If he's standing on a slanted slope, one foot's going to be here on the slope. The other foot is going to be hovering in the air too high up, right? All right, and so you have this character that's standing on a slanted slope, but he's standing perpendicularly with his other foot completely off the ground, and it looks janky, it looks weird. It's because handmade, pre-made animations can't fit every scenario all the time. So what Embark is using in this footage that you're seeing, they are using this model of the Queen in Arc Raiders, and they are letting it walk on uneven surface, and they are letting it learn how to walk. In this way, instead of having a pre-made animation that isn't going to fit all of the different environments that the Queen might be in, instead, they're letting the machine learning generate in real time for the Queen to see where she's stepping and adjust her own animation depending on exactly where she's placing that foot. Using machine learning, using AI to solve problems in meaningful ways that we have not found out how to solve ourselves otherwise. I think, for example, I think a really good way I've heard a lot of other sources describe Embark is that they are a tech company that actually just makes games on the side. And I think that's kind of true when you look a lot of their blog posts. Their blog posts are like very technically related things, like about programming and about engines and about like 3D scanning thing. Like they're making proprietary programs to 3D scan models so they can do their work faster. Like, they kind of are low-key just a tech company that just happens to be making a game at the same time. I think it is kind of funny to put it that way. However, while I would love to say that the story continues uphill, unfortunately this is where the road starts to get a little bit bumpy, because while they might enjoy tinkering, learning, creating new techniques, new ways of doing things, new ways of solving problems that games have had for a long time, at the end of the day, they still have to make a product to sell. So they really have to hunker down, they have to put these new skills to the test, and truly see, can they make a game that is actually worth playing? Alright, like, don't get me wrong, you can show off animations and tech demos and engine demos all day, but nobody wants to play an art gallery. They want to play a game. So I'll save you a few details and just say that over the course of a couple months from when Embark was first founded, they obviously brought in a lot of new people, they brought in a lot of new fresh talent, a lot of new employees, and they immediately began work on 2 of the 3 games in their lineup. As for what the 3rd game in their lineup currently is, allegedly, we don't know what that is at all, or at least I could not find anything about it. However, 2 of these 3 games we obviously know were part of this lineup were Arc Raiders and the Finals, codenamed Project Pioneer and Project Discovery respectively at the time. Back when it was first being worked on, Arc Raiders actually started out as a free-to-play, PvE-only co-op shooter, and by the looks of it, it was also allegedly supposed to be open world. Obviously, this is like nothing what the game is like now, which I think is kind of hilarious when you think about it, but I think it's so weird that the game is like black and white, almost the complete opposite of what it was originally advertised as. However, at the time, that is what the game was. It was PvE only, co-op, and possibly open world. They were prototyping, they were making concept art, And I think it was actually just a couple months in, they even had engine demos. They were working on night and day simulations, looking at the lighting and the environments that they were scanning. It's very impressive for such a short amount of time. And I think at this time, it's very clear and obvious through a lot of the stuff that we see now. Arc Raiders was actually meant to be the main focus of the studio, which I find really interesting because obviously that's not what we see. The finals released way before Arc Raiders did, obviously, but at the time, that was originally not the plan, or at least that's what it really looks like. It looks like Arc Raiders was getting a lot of their attention. It looked like that was their main focus, their main project, and it looked like this, the finals was kind of a side project of sorts. And I'm not ragging on the finals or anything. I've heard that it's absolutely great, but it's obviously a lot smaller in scale compared to Arc Raiders in terms of the maps and the amount that's going on and so on. Just as this project was getting off the ground, COVID-19 hit. The pandemic hit, it locked everyone down, and it brought every production at the time, from movies to games to all kinds of things, especially technologically, manufacturing even. It brought all of these things in production to a halt for a very large majority of studios at the time. But here's where things differ. Not for Embark. You see, during the pandemic, Embark, like most other studios, moved to a sort of working from home or digital working style of doing things, as a lot of us probably did, at least for a short amount of time. Some of us for a lot longer. But let's be honest with ourselves. During the pandemic, work wasn't all that hard. I mean, nobody was breathing down our necks 24/7, so, every once in a while, you take a load off, you relax. I mean, listen, I'm not saying we're proud of it, but it definitely happened, and I think we all know it, right? Not to mention, it's not entirely your fault. I mean, let's be honest. I remember during the pandemic, it was extremely hard to coordinate with anyone on anything. So sometimes I'd find myself waiting for stupid responses from people, or I'd be waiting for someone else to finish their thing that would normally only take a few minutes, now takes hours before I can even start my thing. Or, for example, I'd have a question that I needed answered before I could continue, and it would take 15 or 20 minutes to get an email back, when normally I would just walk in the other room, ask my supervisor, and have gotten an answer in seconds, and then go right back to work. I mean, it really wasn't necessarily anyone's fault, it's just a limitation of the communication. I bring this up because that right there is what killed every large studio during the pandemic. For example, I'm an engineer, so I do a lot of 3D modeling, similar to how people working on games would do a lot of 3D modeling. Somebody needs to be able to look at what I am modeling and tell me what they like, what they don't like in seconds, and they need to be able to get the idea across to me like right now so that I can continue shaping it right now for the rest of the day. But during the pandemic, I'd have to save my 3D model that I was working on, upload it to a weird secure cloud of sorts, because every company's always worried about copyright stuff, so everything has to stay super secure all the time. And the worst part about those is that sometimes the upload process is super slow on those secure kind of things. Then I'd have to email my superior. Then he has to open whatever modeling software I'm using. And if you know anything about 3D modeling, some of them open really fast and some of them don't. Then he has to open the file. And if you've 3D modeled, sometimes you open a file and it freaking takes forever. Have you ever opened a 3D model in Blender? It can take some time sometimes. It's bad. And then on top of this, whoever I'm having look at the model has to read the words on my email and then also try and figure out what I'm talking about exactly on the model. Now imagine that scale on the scale of hundreds, if not over 1,000 people in a big studio like that. It's not happening. It's impossible. However, unlike these studios, which struggled so heavily during the pandemic, Embark had a very small, very technologically savvy team. And this is why I brought it up so much earlier. They are a very, very tech-based company, which I find really interesting because that is what has clearly allowed them to quickly adapt and continue to work at record pace. For example, by the latter half of 2020, Patrick Sutherland, the CEO, stated that the studio was still growing employees during the pandemic. which I find absolutely crazy. Like, I remember during the pandemic, everyone was getting laid off. Every company was like downsizing because they knew the production was, crawling to a halt and they needed to save money. So everyone was getting laid off. Everyone was getting fired. But no, Embark Studios said, no, we're actually working at record pace during the pandemic. We're working so fast and so well that we actually need more people. And apparently during the pandemic, having almost 200 people at the time, which is just wild. All right, they're doing everything the complete opposite of what every other studio was doing at the time. Every other studio was crawling to a halt, struggling heavily, laying people off. Embark said, no, we're pushing full steam ahead. We're hiring more people. We're actually succeeding even more. We're growing even more. And I think that's just absolutely wild. Moving into 2021, it was time to reveal the project to the masses. And so at the Game Awards that year, we got our first advertised look at what they had been doing the whole time. And let me tell you, people exploded for it. Now, a really, really important thing to keep in mind here is that this is 2021 we're talking about. This was during the time of Fortnite and Apex Legends and maybe Warzone. I don't even remember. I hate Call of Duty, so I'm not even researching when that came out. I don't care enough. But I think Warzone was out at the time. Point is, battle royales were at their peak. So for people that either didn't necessarily like battle royales or they were just sick of every single freaking game having one, let me tell you, Arc Raiders looked like a breath of fresh air, which I think is just so fascinating, by the way. Like, to a certain degree, if the gaming market wasn't so absurdly stale and boring at the time, especially over the last 4 to 5 years, I don't think Arc Raiders would be getting nearly as much attention as it currently is. People are yearning so much right now for something new, something different, something creative. And that just so happens to be exactly what Embark was making with Arc Raiders at the time and what they're about to launch here in 5 days. And this is where things really start to take a turn for the worse. Completely assuming here, but I think it's somewhat of a common sense assumption, is that around this time, maybe even a couple months after, but it's still within the same time frame, probably a couple months after the Game Awards, they probably made a demo build of the game, either for themselves or possibly for playtesters to try out, actually. However, it's very obvious that Patrick Sutherland said during the game's development at this time that they had to accept it. Guys, this game is not fun. And he says this in quite a few articles that you can find, interviews with Patrick himself online, saying that, guys, this game is not fun, and that they had to accept that what they were making looked good, but it was not fun, and it was not ready. So I'm assuming that this obviously means they had a playtest. I can't find confirmation of that, but I would assume they had a playtest of some kind, or they made a demo build and maybe just amongst themselves as developers tried playing it and weren't even enjoying it themselves. Either way, I'm assuming the feedback that they got was bad, because it's one thing to say it behind closed doors. It's another thing for a CEO to say this publicly in an interview for journalists to see and write that your game is not fun. Another really important figure here, an executive producer, Alexander Grundle, said, "It took me a long time to understand what we were even trying to do. There's moments of fun, but it doesn't completely gel." And I think what he's trying to say here, by the way, when he says it doesn't completely gel, I'm assuming what he means is that perhaps there were parts of the game that were intriguing, but perhaps too much of the game was just walking around. Maybe it would just, the experience felt hollow, or maybe it wasn't challenging enough, something like that. And I think this is really important because as I'm researching a lot of this on the timeline of this development, things do become a little bit confusing here. However, I think it makes sense that around this time is very likely where they decided to insert the PvP into the game, as I did find one source stating that Embark, quote, didn't originally want to make another PvP game, in that they were, quote, tired of PvP. And so I think it makes sense that around this time, when you think about it, this is probably when they decided to, bite the bullet, turn on their own words, and add PvP to the game, because It seems a lot through research that they didn't want to do that, but obviously we know now, hindsight being 2020, obviously the game has PvP in it. It's a really large, major point of the game. And let me explain why. If you played in the server slam this weekend, let me just ask you, if only the Ark were in the game to threaten you, would it have been that much fun? I think we all know the answer to that. It would have been no. And it isn't, by the way, it isn't because the Ark aren't threatening at all. They're actually genuinely very threatening, and I would go as far to say that I think the Ark in Ark Raiders are probably the most threatening AI enemies of any extraction game I've ever played. But they're still AI. They're still predictable. They're still easily outsmarted with some planning. The PvP, I think, makes total sense that they probably didn't have the PvP at this point in time, but it's probably what was needed to add in the element of surprise, to shake up the encounters. Because with just Ark in the game, I can imagine that, sure, when you run into an Ark, it gets exciting, but all of the downtime in between was probably boring, and I bet this is somewhat of what Alexander was pointing to. There are brief moments of excitement, but other than that, the large majority of it felt hollow. It felt boring. From here, they also changed, this is a big deal at the time for a lot of people, and I'll explain why in a second. From here, they also changed from the free-to-play model to a premium $40 model that they have now. And this one, to me, is very interesting for a couple of reasons. I think one of the big reasons is that it actually shows me another big green flag that I have for Embark, and that they understand how the game market works. For example, when Grundle was asked about this change, this is Alexander, the last guy I was talking about, he said, for free-to-play games, they need to strike a careful balance between providing engaging content and encouraging players to make purchases. For Ark Raiders, this shift will allow us to focus more on the engagement, fun, and impact on choices with regards to how the game evolves over time. So we can optimize differently in this game and give out more rewards as the players progress. I think this is a really big green flag. And let me explain. You gotta give me a moment. Let me tell you why this is such a green flag for me, that Embark actually understands how to incentivize themselves to make a good quality game, okay? Let me explain. This is 2021, 2022 era, free-to-play era, all these battle royales, battle passes out the wazoo, microtransactions out the wazoo. But look at those games now, all right? Look at the battle royales on the market now. They're dying, okay? Look at Warzone. Look at Apex. They're dying, bro. It's bad. And you know why? It's because those games have no incentive to make a good game anymore. They are only incentivized to make cosmetics for you to buy, all right? Think about it. I'll give you an example. For those of you who like Warzone, I don't know who you are, but some people like it. It's not my thing. I really don't like it. I'll admit that. It's really not my thing. But for those of you that like Warzone, how long have they been telling you that that new map, it's called like Avalon or whatever, they've been telling you guys that that thing's coming for like freaking ages at this point, right? And then it finally got revealed that it's coming like next fall or something, like next summer, like 8 more months from now, after you guys have already been like waiting like a year or something for, like, you know why? It's because it doesn't make them money, right? If they make a new map, if they make new weapons, new maps, new game modes, it doesn't make them any money. The only thing that makes them money is skins and cosmetics. So they're not focused on making a good game that's fun to play. They're focused on making cosmetics, mostly. I'm just going to say it. I think if Ark Raiders was free to play, think about it. They would only have to make the game good enough for you to bother clicking download, all right, from the Steam store. That the game would only have to be enjoyable enough for you to click download, okay? They could make the game such a low-quality piece of garbage that's just good enough to try, and then they could just microtransaction it to death, like a lot of games do. Instead, with the game being $40, now Embark is incentivized to make the base game, the flow of the game, the progression, the gameplay in matches, but even the macro gameplay on a larger scale. Like if you've played an extraction shooter, if you've never played an extraction shooter, The macro gameplay of the extraction shooters is very important to the genre of an extraction shooter. They have to make not only the gameplay in matches fun, but also consecutively from match to match as you snowball loot. They have to make that enjoyable as well. They have to make all of these aspects of the game worth your $40. And it incentivizes them, it incentivizes Embark to make a game that is far more worth playing at the end of the day than if it was free to play. Now, with those two decisions behind them, this brings up the next really big milestone in the game's development, and that's what I'm going to be calling the re-reveal. You see, during the time where they got a lot of really bad feedback and then Patrick Sutherland said, guys, this game ain't fun, they basically decided to delay the game and pull it behind curtains and work on it somewhat behind closed doors for a long time. I didn't see a lot of news about the game. Nobody really did. We didn't know what the heck they were doing for like close to a couple years, really. And so in 2024, in the month of October, they had their first private playtest for invited players only. And let me tell you, this had so many people waiting, wondering, like, what on earth was the game going to turn into? They said it's going to be PvP all of a sudden. They changed it from free to play to $40. And then they took it like kind of behind closed curtains and worked on the game for like close to 2 years. And there was really not a lot said. They pretty much said, hey guys, we're going to completely re-envision the whole game. And then we didn't hear anything for a long time. And then all of a sudden, in October of 2024, they're like, all right, we're having a private playtest for invited people only. It was kind of secret. And then after that, they held another public test 6 months later. This was Tech Test 2. In the following year, in 2025, from the end of April into May. And let me tell you, I don't think that this playtest could have gone any better for them.
I think they really have. I genuinely think they have something really cool here. I think your average player doesn't give a fuck that it's an extraction game. They're going to come in, they're going to take a free kit, and they're going to have an amazing journey. They're going to play 1 or 2 raids. Who cares? Who cares about the extraction part? It's not even about that. Just fucking experiencing the game is incredible. I don't know how to explain it. The atmosphere, the sound design, the fucking pressure of all the robots.
Oh my God!
Did you check the industrial areas by the dam?
Oh my God! No way! Go ahead and buy one more of those from the fella.
Come on in, friend. You're going to love hanging out with me. I just know it.
Keep this guy away from schools.
Like the actual good loot part. I found it before.
We got 10 minutes.
Embark stuck with this project through thick and thin for almost 6 years at this point, and Tech Test 2 hits in April and May of 2025, and dude, they are finally seeing the fruits of their labors. I mean, people are loving it. Shortly after this, they decided to announce the release date for October of this year, and with, at the time of recording this, less than a week left for it to release, I can say when you take a step back and look at the entire development cycle of Arc Raiders, it is just insane. All right, 6 years. They worked on it for 3 years, only for it to be terrible, to be borderline garbage, and then go, you know what? We're going to take another 3 years and just completely transition it into something else. And it turns out to be one of the most anticipated games of the year, and what I think is going to be one of the best games of the decade. And I think it's funny that I say that now. I wrote that sentence in my script like a week ago. I wrote that in this script that I was going to just say this and let it be done. I think Arc Raiders is going to be one of the best games of the decade. And just a couple days ago, a couple of the developers did an interview on YouTube, and you can go find it, where the developers talk about the fact that they want to support the game for 10 years. I don't know if they're actually going to be able to manage doing that, but I just think that that is crazy. Like, it's a total coincidence, I know, but I think it's so funny that I have that sentence in my script, that is my prediction, that I think it's going to be one of the best games for the next decade. And then literally a couple days later, after I wrote this script, a couple of the developers are like, yeah, we plan to we'd really like to support the game for 10 years. I'm like, what is this? What are the odds of this coincidence? The development story of Arc Raiders really shows me how passionate Embark Studios is in its entirety. I mean, think about it. What game studio would have stuck with a project, spent this much time, this much money, right? Having something completely be a total failure and still stick with it because they care about it so much to turn it into what might be one of the most exciting games of all time. It's a story born out of frustration and burnout with an industry that was mismanaged and abused, and it led to a group of individuals choosing to make their own way, to create their own vision, leading them to failure, but to then rise from the ashes and make possibly one of the greatest games to be made. But that will have to wait to be seen when it releases. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm super excited for it. It is this Thursday when the game releases, and let me tell you, I have not been this antsy for a game in years. I think Embark has done nothing but earn my trust over the course of the development of this game. I think they have done nothing but showcase how passionate they are about this project, and I am so excited to see what they do next.